cardiovascular system is sometimes called the blood vascular or simply the circulatory system. It consists of the heart, which is a muscular pumping device, and a closed system of vessels called arteries, veins, and capillaries. As the name implies, blood contained in the circulatory system is pumped by the heart around the closed circle or circuit of vessels as it passes again and again to the various circulations of the body. Three components: 1. Blood, 2. Heart, 3. Blood vessel. The functions of blood: 1. For transportation, 2. For regulation, and 3. Protection. Physical characteristics of blood: it is denser and more viscous than water. Temperature 38 degrees or 100.4 Fahrenheit. Blood volume in male adult 5 to 6 liters or 1.5 gallon. In female 4 to 5 liters 1.2 gallon. Venipuncture is the withdrawal of blood from a vein using a needle and a syringe. Components of blood: 1. Blood plasma, a watery liquid that contains dissolved substances like globulins, albumins. 2. Formed elements, cells and cell fragments. What is plasma? Plasma is the largest part of your blood. This fluid carries the blood components throughout the body. It makes up more than half, about 55%, of its overall content. When separated from the rest of the blood, plasma is a light yellow liquid. Plasma carries water, salt, and enzymes. The main role of plasma is to take nutrients, hormones, and proteins to the part of the body that need it. Cells also put their waste products into the plasma. The plasma then helps remove this waste from the body. Plasma also carries all part of the blood to your circulatory system. Plasma is a critical part of the treatment for many serious health problems. This is why there are blood drives asking people to donate blood plasma. Along with water, salt, and enzymes, plasma also contains important components. These include antibodies, clothing factors, and the proteins albumin and fibrinogen. Blood plasma is composed of 91.5% water and 8.5% solutes, proteins or plasma proteins. Plasma proteins are also called antibodies. Antibody binds specifically to the foreign substance called antigen that provokes its production. Antigen is a toxin or other foreign substance which induces an immune response in the body, especially the production of antibodies. Formed elements are 1. RBC or red blood cells, or what we call erythrocytes. 2 is WBC or your white blood cells or your leukocytes. 3 is platelets or thrombocytes. Red blood cells or erythrocytes. The size is small cells about 7.5 micrometer in diameter. Shape: biconcave disc to increase the surface area for oxygen binding with depressed centers. Normal numbers: 25 trillion, 5.5 million cubic millimeter in men, and 4.4 to 4.5 million cubic millimeter in women. Lifespan: lives about 120 days, and it contains two special forms of proteins. You have the hemoglobin, which is the protein which sets as an oxygen carrier, pigment that gives blood its color. As RBCs circulate through the lungs, hemoglobin picks up oxygen. The hemoglobin carries oxygen to the cells. As the blood circulates through the body, oxygen is given to the cells. The cells release carbon dioxide, a waste product, which is picked up by the hemoglobin. Number 2 is the spectrin, protein in the cell membrane, which is responsible for the deformability of the cell membrane. Hematocrit, percentage of the total blood volume occupied by the RBC. Normal range, adult female 38 to 46%, average is 42%. Adult male 40 to 54%, average is 47%. RBC disorders, you have 1. Anemia, and number 2. Polycythemia. White blood cells or leukocytes, colorless and do not contain hemoglobin. Normal number, 5,000 to 10,000 cubic millimeter of blood. Lifespan, about 9 days. Function is to combat inflammation and infection. Production, it is produced in the bone marrow. Significance of elevated and depressed WBC counts. There are several different types of white blood cells, each with varying responsibilities. 1. Lymphocytes. These are vital for producing antibodies that help the body to defend itself against bacteria, viruses, and other threats. Neutrophils. These are powerful white blood cells that destroy bacteria and fungi. Basophils. These alert the body to infections by secreting chemicals into the bloodstream, mostly to combat allergies. Eosinophils. These are responsible for destroying parasites and cancer cells, and they are part of an allergic response. Monocytes. These are responsible for attacking and breaking down germs or bacteria that enter the body. When necessary, monocytes travel to other organs such as spleen, liver, lungs, and bone marrow, where they transfer into a cell called macrophage. A macrophage is responsible for many functions, including removing dead or damaged tissue, destroying cancer cells, and regulating the immune response. High count in neutrophils may indicate bacterial infections, burns, or stress inflammation. Low count may indicate radiation exposure, drug toxicity, vitamin B12 deficiency. Low count in lymphocytes may indicate viral infection or some leukemias. Low count may indicate prolonged illnesses, treatment with cortisol. High count in monocytes may indicate viral or fungal infections, tuberculosis, and other chronic diseases. Low count may indicate bone marrow depression, treatment with cortisol. High count in eosinophils may indicate allergic reactions, parasitic infections. Low count may indicate drug toxicity or stress. High count in basophils may indicate allergic reactions, leukemias, cancers. Low count may indicate pregnancy, ovulation, stress, hyperthyroidism. At the first sign of infection, WBC rushes to the site of infection and begins to multiply rapidly. The number of WBC increases when there is an infection in the body. WBC disorder, leukemia, platelets or thrombocytes, normal number 200,000 to 400,000 per cubic millimeter of blood. Lifespan 5 to 9 days. Function, it is necessary for the clotting of blood. Production and the bone marrow. Normal clotting depends on adequate vitamin K in the body. Hemostasis. It is a sequence of responses that stops bleeding. 3 mechanisms that reduce blood loss. 1. Vascular spasm. When arteries or arterioles are damaged, the circularly arranged smooth muscle in their walls contracts immediately. Number 2. Platelet plug formation. Mass formed by the accumulation and attachment of large numbers of platelets. 3 phases. First phase, platelet adhesion. Platelets contract and sticks to parts of the damaged blood vessel. Second phase, platelet release reaction. Extend many projections that enable them to contract and interact with one another. The third phase, platelet aggregation. Gathering of platelets, or the clumping together of platelets in the blood. Platelet aggregation is part of the sequence of events leading to the formation of a thrombus or clot. The third mechanism is blood clotting. Normally, blood remains in its liquid form as long as it stays within its vessels. If it drawn from the body, it thickens and forms a gel. Complete blood count, CBC, a valuable test that screens for anemia and various infections. Transfusion, the transfer of whole blood from the donor to the receiver. Type AB, universal recipient or receiver. Type O, universal donor. Antigen is contained in the RBC, while antibody contained in the blood plasma. What are antigens? Antigens are proteins or carbohydrates which our immune system can recognize. Any antigen that is foreign to our immune system is destroyed by an antibody. Antibodies are attack molecules our immune system makes to protect ourselves against foreign things such as bacteria and viruses. Antibodies can also be formed in response to different blood groups. Everyone is born with some antibodies. So before you receive a transfusion, compatibility testing is performed between the donated blood and a patient's blood sample. Blood group antigens are either sugars or proteins, and they are attached to various components in the red blood cell membrane. For example, the antigens of the ABO blood group are sugars. They are produced by a series of reactions in which enzymes catalyze the transfer of sugar units. Plasma contains anti-A and anti-B antibodies, depending upon the blood group. Our body also has antibodies to A and or B antigens according to our blood group. Patients should only receive plasma that does not contain an antibody which could attack the antigens present on their own red cells. Group A recipients have A antigen on their red cells, so they cannot receive Group O or Group B plasma as their anti-A will attack the red cells. So Group B recipients have B antigen on their red cells, so they cannot receive Group O or Group A plasma as the anti-B will attack their red cells. Group AB recipients can only receive Group AB plasma. Group O recipients do not have either A or B antigen, so can safely receive plasma of any blood group type. Your red blood cell antigens are formed before your antibodies form. The interesting thing is that the antibodies that get produced by your body are based on the antigen not present on your red blood cells. Therefore, if you have type A antigens stuck on the outside of your red blood cells, you will develop only anti-B antibodies. This is a very good thing if you think about it, because if you had type A antigens on your red blood cells and your body formed anti-A antibodies, they will destroy your own blood. Let's consider type B blood. Being blood type B means you inherited type B antigens, and the red blood cells in your body would have B antigens attached to them. Your immune system would be used to seeing B antigens and would tolerate them just fine. However, your immune system would not be familiar with A antigens because they are not present on your red blood cells. Your body would then form antibodies against A antigens called anti-A antibodies, and this mixing could lead to clumping or agglutination of the blood. When you have type B blood, it's almost like the B red blood cells own the neighborhood, and they do not want type A blood cells moving in. In fact, they create anti-A antibodies to stand guard and keep the A's away. So, blood type A, antigen on RBC is also A. Antibody in plasma is anti-B. Compatible donors, A and O. Incompatible donor, B, AB. Blood type B, antigen on RBC is B. Antibody in plasma, anti-A. Compatible donor, B and O. Incompatible donor, A and AB. Blood type AB. Antigen on RBC is both A and B. Antibody in plasma, none. Compatible donor, A, B, AB, and O. Incompatible, none. Blood type O. Antigen on RBC, there is none. Antibody in plasma, both anti-A and anti-B. Compatible donor, O. Incompatible donor, A, B, and AB. This picture shows the recipient of the blood types here. So for example, AB plus can only donate blood to an AB plus. For AB negative, they can only donate blood to AB plus and AB negative. The heart is a muscle that pumps through the blood vessels to the tissues and cells. With each heartbeat, it sends life-giving blood throughout the body. The size is about the size of one's closed fist, 12 centimeter or 5 inches long, 9 centimeter or 3.5 inches wide, and 6 centimeter or 2.5 inches thick. Weight is 250 to 275 grams in adult females and 275 to 360 grams in adult males. The location is mediastinal cavity, medial to the lungs. Shape, cone-shaped with apex pointing downwards and to the left. It is enclosed by a pericardium. Layers of the heart. Epicardium, the outermost layer. Myocardium, the middle layer, which consists of cardiac muscles, the layer that actually contracts. And the third layer is endocardium, the innermost layer composed of endothelial cells, which lines the heart chambers. It is continuous with the endothelial lining of the blood vessels leaving and entering the heart. Chambers of the heart. Upper chamber, 2 atria. Lower chamber has 2 ventricles. Atria, the receiving chambers for blood returning to the heart from the circulation. Right atrium, larger than the left atrium, but the walls are very thin. Receives unoxygenated blood by the 3 veins. The superior vena cava returns blood to the heart from the body regions above the diaphragm. The inferior vena cava returns blood to the heart from the body regions below the diaphragm. Corona sinus collects blood draining from the myocardium itself. Left atrium. This chamber has thicker walls than the right and it receives oxygenated blood from the lung by way of pulmonary veins. Ventricles. The discharging chambers or the actual pumps of the heart. As they contract, blood is propelled out of the heart into the circulation. Right ventricle receives unoxygenated blood from the right atrium and pumps blood into the lungs throughout the pulmonary artery. Left ventricle It has a very thick wall because it pumps blood received from the LA or the left atrium to the whole body through the aorta. Interatrial septum separates the right from the left atria. Interventricular septum separates the right from the left ventricle. Valves of the heart. Functions of the valve. 1. Closes when backward pressure pushes blood backward. Number 2. Opens when backward pressure forces blood in a forward direction. Atrioventricular orifice or AV valves found between the atrium and the ventricle. There are two types. Tricuspid valve guards the opening between the right atrium and the right ventricle, made up of three cusps. Function: prevents backflow of blood from the right ventricle to the right atrium. Bicuspid or mitral valve guards the opening between the left atrium and left ventricle, made up of two cusps. Cusp means a pointed end where two curves meet. Now, the function of bicuspid or mitral valve is to prevent backflow of blood from the left ventricle to the left atrium. Letter B. Semilunar valves. Pulmonary valve guards the opening between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery. The function is to prevent backflow of blood from the aorta to the left ventricle. Rheumatic fever, failure of the valve to open and close properly or leaks constantly due to damage of the bicuspid valve or the aortic semilunar valves caused by the damage brought by the streptococcal bacteria. The major blood vessels connected to your heart are the aorta, the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, the pulmonary artery, which takes oxygen-poor blood from the heart to the lungs, where it is oxygenated, the pulmonary veins, which bring oxygen-rich blood from the lungs to the heart, and the coronary arteries, which supply blood to the heart muscle. On the inside, the heart is a four-chambered hollow organ. It is divided into the left and right side by a wall called the septum. The right and left sides of the heart are further divided into two top chambers called the atria, which receive blood from the veins, and two bottom chambers called ventricles, which pump blood into the arteries. The atria and ventricles work together, contracting and relaxing to pump blood out of the heart. As blood leaves each chamber of the heart, it passes through a valve. There are four heart valves within the heart: mitral valve, tricuspid valve, aortic valve, pulmonic, also called pulmonary valve. The tricuspid and mitral valves lie between the atria and ventricles. The aortic and pulmonic valves lie between the ventricles and the major blood vessels leaving the heart. The heart valves work the same way as one-way valves in the plumbing of your home. They prevent blood from flowing in the wrong direction. Each valve has a set of flaps called leaflets or cusps. The mitral valve has two leaflets. The other have three. The leaflets are attached to and supported by a ring of tough, fibrous tissue called the annulus. The annulus help to maintain the proper shape of the valve. The leaflets of the mitral and tricuspid valves are also supported by tough, fibrous strings called chordae tendineae. These are similar to the strings supporting a parachute. They extend from the valve leaflets to small muscles called papillary muscles, which are part of the inside walls of the ventricles. From the right side, blood enters the heart through two large veins, the inferior and superior vena cava, emptying oxygen-poor blood from the body into the right atrium. As the atrium contracts, blood flows from your right atrium into your right ventricle through the open tricuspid valve. When the ventricle is full, the tricuspid valve shuts. This prevents blood from flowing backward into the atria while the ventricle contracts. As the ventricle contracts, blood leaves the heart through the pulmonic valve into the pulmonary artery and to the lungs where it is oxygenated. On the left side, the pulmonary vein empties oxygen-rich blood from the lungs into the left atrium. As the atrium contracts, blood flows from your left atrium into your left ventricle through the open mitral valve. When the ventricle is full, the mitral valve shuts. This prevents blood from flowing backward into the atrium while the ventricle contracts. As the ventricle contracts, blood leaves the heart through the aortic valve into the aorta and to the body. And once blood travels through the pulmonic valve, it enters your lungs. This is now what we call the pulmonary circulation. From your pulmonic valve, blood travels to the pulmonary artery to tiny capillary vessels in the lungs. Here, oxygen travels from the tiny air sacs in the lungs through the walls of the capillaries into the blood. At the same time, carbon dioxide, a waste product of metabolism, passes from the blood into the air sacs. Carbon dioxide leaves the body when you exhale. Once the blood is purified and oxygenated, it travels back to the left atrium through the pulmonary veins. The systemic circulation provides the functional blood supply to all body tissue. It carries oxygen and nutrients to the cells and picks up carbon dioxide and waste products. Systemic circulation carries oxygenated blood from the left ventricle through the arteries to the capillaries in the tissues of the body. From the tissue capillaries, the deoxygenated blood returns through a system of veins to the right atrium of the heart, while the pulmonary circulation transports oxygen-poor blood from the right ventricle to the lungs, where blood picks up a new blood supply, then it returns the oxygen-rich blood to the left atrium. The cardiac conduction system is a group of specialized cardiac muscle cells in the walls of the heart that sends signals to the heart muscle, causing it to contract. The main components of the cardiac conduction system are the SA node, the AV node, bundle of His, bundle branches, and Purkinje fibers. The SA node, anatomical pacemaker, starts the sequence by causing the atrial muscles to contract. From there, the signal travels to the AV node through the bundle of His, down the bundle branches, and through the Purkinje fibers, causing the ventricles to contract. This signal creates an electrical current that can be seen on a graph called an electrocardiogram, EKG or ECG. Doctors use an EKG to monitor the cardiac conduction system's electrical activity in the heart. Sympathetic NS or nervous system speeds the rate of the heart. Parasympathetic NS slows the rate of the heart. Cardiac cycle, one heartbeat. In normal cardiac cycle, the two atria contract while the two ventricles relax. Then while the two ventricles contract, the two atria relax. Phases. Systole is when the heart muscle contracts. When the heart contracts, it pushes the blood out of the heart and into the large blood vessels of the circulatory system. From here, the blood goes to all of the organs and tissues of the body. During systole, a person's blood pressure increases. Diastole is when the heart muscle relaxes. When the heart relaxes, the chambers of the heart fill with blood and a person's blood pressure decreases. Cardiac output refers to the amount of blood that is pumped out of the ventricles in 1 minute. Stroke volume, amount of blood ejected by the ventricle, is 60 to 70 ml per beat. CO, stroke volume times heart rate per minute. Heart sounds. During each cardiac cycle, 2 heart sounds can be heard through the stethoscope applied to the chest wall. These are described as lub, dub, and are associated with closure of heart valves. A. Lub, loud due to closure of the atrioventricular valve. First heart sound corresponds to the closure of the AV valves, louder and stronger than the second heart sound. Dub, softer because of the closure of the aortic and pulmonary valve. The second heart sound corresponds to the closure of the semilunar valves, shorter and softer than the first heart sound. Auscultation, the act of listening to the sounds within the body, and it is usually done using the stethoscope. Electrocardiogram, the graphic recording of electrical changes of cardiac activity, monitors the electrical currents generated and transmitted to the heart, also spread throughout the body. 1 lub-dub is counted as 1 heartbeat. The normal heart rate is influenced by the following factors. 1. Age. Average are as follows. Fetus, 140 beats per minute. Infant, 120 to 130 beats per minute. Child, 90 to 100 beats per minute. Adult, 60 to 80 beats per minute. Number 2, exercise increases the heart rate. Number 3, emotional excitement increases heart rate. Number 4, hemorrhage. Where there is excessive bleeding, the heart rate is temporarily increased as a compensatory mechanism. And number 5, temperature increases heart rate. Blood vessels. The blood vessels form a closed system of tubes that carries blood away from the heart, transport it to the tissues of the body, and then returns it to the heart. Types: arteries and veins. Arteries always carry oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary arteries and umbilical arteries. Veins always carry unoxygenated blood except for the pulmonary veins and umbilical veins. Structure of blood vessel walls. Layers. Tunica intima. Innermost layer made up of endothelium, which is continuous with the endocardium of the heart, nearest to the lumen, the hollow center through which the blood flows. Vasoconstrict, reduction in lumen diameter due to muscle contraction. Vasodilate, widening of the lumen diameter to the muscle relaxation. Number 2, tunica media, composed of smooth muscles which are circularly arranged. The bulkiest layer of arteries. The activity of this layer is regulated by vasomotor, nerve fibers of the sympathetic nervous system. Number 3 is the tunica adventitia, outermost layer composed of collagen fibers that protects the blood vessels. In larger vessels, it contains vesa vasorum, nourished to the external tissues of blood vessel walls. The deeper portion obtains its nutrients directly from blood in the lumen.